tonight.
President Zelenskyy, thank you so much for making time for the Christian Broadcasting Network.
3 years into Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine, CBN sits down for an exclusive interview with President Volodymyr Zelenskyy to discuss the future of his war-torn country. Plus,
to the extent President Biden faced a choice, it was between ending the war or escalating it.
the Secretary of State has a showdown with GOP lawmakers over the Biden administration's chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. And the latest on inflation in America. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
CBN News meets with the man on the front lines of Ukraine's war for survival. Good evening and welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup.
And in Washington, I'm Jenna Browder. The U.S. warns Russia may be ready to use a lethal new missile against Ukraine. It's the latest in a nearly 3-year-long war that's destroyed lives, leveled entire cities, and upended global stability.
That's right. President Zelenskyy told me in a one-on-one interview he's counting on President-elect Donald Trump to stand strong with his country, even though Mr. Trump has threatened to halt aid to Ukraine and force it to make a deal with Russia. Meanwhile, Zelenskyy is moving to win more international support.
Ukraine's wartime president, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, entered the world stage through a chain of events that led to the impeachment of an American president, and again in 2022 when Russia launched its full-scale invasion. Now, after nearly 3 years of fighting, he hopes to bring the war to an end as President-elect Donald Trump seeks to usher in a new political world order. In Kyiv, our cameras caught President Zelenskyy thanking battle-scarred soldiers at a military prayer breakfast. Back at his office, we discussed a range of topics, including peace talks with Putin, his desire to join NATO, and how Donald Trump's re-election in the U.S. is changing the course of Europe's largest land war since World War II.
President Zelenskyy, thank you so much for making time for the Christian Broadcasting Network. Well, one of the things that I've been struck by as we've been here in Ukraine, talking to members of parliament, talking to religious leaders, and even, ordinary people, is how frequently people are discussing peace. Has that changed because of the dynamics of President Trump being elected?
First of all, people in Ukraine wanted peace always. When full-scale invasion started, people had no other way as to take weapons because their children were killed. And I'm quite sure I do not want your countries and our neighbors in the United States, I do not want you to have war. But if that happens, you would do the same. Ukraine is a very peaceful country and, by the way, very believing nation. You know that even the majority of evangelicals are here in Ukraine. Our Council of Churches is the biggest one. People of different faiths, different religions, but they are very much a believing nation. And for them, there is this hope that Trump has this position as a strong president. That is what is coming across. And I think that Putin understands the strength only. So then he would see that there is this strong president, strong country standing with Ukraine, and then we can achieve peace through strength.
How will negotiating for peace with Trump back in the White House be different than the current relationship?
I think we will be able to understand one another, and I think that with this new president of the United States, we are siding together. He does want to end this war, and we Ukrainians really want to end that war as well. And he understands that America cannot lose. America cannot come across as weak. If evil is not placed to where it belongs, then it will be examples to other authoritarian regimes that are watching.
Mr. President, I know that you're looking for some assurances from NATO. I think one of the terms that's used is the NATO umbrella. Your critics would say that that's not going to happen. So what do you mean when you say security assurances under a NATO umbrella?
When we are talking about a model that would disable people coming to your land with weaponaries and border protection, then we are talking the only available model, working model, at least among the NATO countries, because they are not in war. Praise God. Praise God that they do not have that war, because it is suffering. So we do believe those guarantees, NATO umbrella, as I said, invitation is the step one, because that would send a very clear signal to Putin or any other aggressor, you name it, that Ukraine is going to be a NATO member.
Some estimates, the official count, I believe, is about 20,000 Ukrainian children who've been forcibly moved from Ukraine to Russia. Some numbers say as many as hundreds of thousands. What is the priority in getting them back? Where do they factor into the equation of peace talks?
Children, that's very difficult to come back. How do we bring military people? Even that is difficult. Sometimes we can bring back civilians, and we have some tools to do that. Now, when it comes to children, that's very difficult. Why? Because we cannot exchange children for children. Yes, they have deported children, deported by strength. We are not capturing Russian children. We are not stealing children. We are not deporting their children. That never, ever happens.
A lot of the support that you've received, for example, funding for Ukrainian aid, came through the help of evangelical Christians. We also have seen evangelical churches in Poland help to receive a lot of Ukrainians who are fleeing, provide them with food and with clothing and other needs. How crucial has the support of evangelical Christians been to what Ukraine has been going through?
As I've told you, we have the majority of evangelicals in Europe, and their support is very important, and I want to thank them. And I want to thank all the churches, all the evangelical Christians. As I have said, we have representatives of different religions and faiths and confessions, and from the very beginning of the full-scale invasion, they were helping a lot. And you know, anywhere where Russia would come and occupy, they would ruin churches and schools. And they killed 50 priests. And what profit do they gain when they ruined over 700 church buildings? It just underlines one more time that this Russian direction, one language, one church, that's their understanding.
John, that was a great interview. You asked some really thoughtful questions. I'm wondering, they are 3 years into this war. What did you think of Zelenskyy, and how do the people there view him?
You know, let me start with the latter part of your question. I get the sense, if you look at polling, Ukrainians still support Volodymyr Zelenskyy. His support has slipped since the beginning of the war, but there's still a great level of trust in how he's leading the war effort. I think the question for most Ukrainians, the sense that I got, is that they're no longer looking for this idea of winning the war. I think after 3 years of war in February, it's more about how will the war end, when will the war end, and I think that weariness that's over Ukraine is also what's over him. So when we met at his presidential office, he was relaxed. He was pleasant, but you could feel a sense, a weight that was on him, understandably, as he's overseeing this war and trying to figure a way to navigate some type of peace agreement with Russia. You know, when you talk about the asymmetry of this war, for example, you heard his last response about children. How do we get the children back? What he was essentially trying to say is this war is asymmetrical. Not only does Russia have this great military power, it's how they're administering the war. They're going in and they're taking children. He's saying we're not taking children, not because we're doing tit for tat. That's just not who we are. So when we're trying to gain back, civilians or prisoners of war or military prisoners of war. We can do that in a trading system, but this war is being administered asymmetrically.
Yeah, on that point, what do you see as the biggest sticking point between Russia and Ukraine?
I think it's two things. I think the main thing is the NATO invitation that he was requesting. It's a non-starter for Russians, and I just don't see President Trump, when he gets into office, supporting that. The second thing is, what are they going to do with occupied land? He continually said that it's in the Ukrainian constitution not to give up the land. I wonder, though, if he's stating that over and over again as just a posturing position, so that when they get to negotiating table, it might be something he's willing to give up.
Yeah, ahead of negotiations.
That's right.
Well, John, it was a great interview, and thank you for going over there and for lining this up and for being just a face for CBN over there.
It was great to be an ambassador for CBN.
All right, up next, Israel strikes Syria and threats from Iran. What it all means for the Middle East when Faith Nation returns.
Well, welcome back. A new world order is taking shape in Syria. The jihadi rebels who overthrew dictator Bashar al-Assad are now vowing to punish those who tortured prisoners under his regime.
This is Israel carried out airstrikes across the country. The goal, to eliminate weapons that could be used against the Jewish state. Israel says it has launched nearly 500 strikes in total, destroying 80% of Syria's military assets like air bases and weapon stockpiles. New footage shows IDF troops moving inside a Syrian buffer zone, said to keep extremists away from its borders. The fall of Assad is a major blow to Iran, which used Syria to move weapons to its proxies in the region. Iran is alleging Israel conspired with the U.S. to bring Assad down. Israel issuing this warning to the rebels in charge.
We want relations with the new regime in Syria, but if this regime allows Iran to reestablish itself in Syria or allows the transfer of Iranian weapons or any other weapons to Hezbollah or attacks us, we will respond forcefully and we will exact a heavy price from it.
Meanwhile, as Israel continues striking Hamas in Gaza, Netanyahu stands trial for corruption, accused of fraud and bribery. He denies all wrongdoing. Joining us now is Victoria Coates of the Heritage Foundation. She is a former national security advisor to President Trump and author of the new book, The Battle for the Jewish State, How Israel and America Can Win. Victoria, welcome. So what's your reaction, Victoria, to what's happening in Syria right now?
Well, John, Jenna, good to be with you. Now, I think over the last particularly 48 hours, we're getting kind of a masterclass on why Israel is such a critical ally to the United States. We all know that the brutal dictator Bashar al-Assad had been amassing over a half a century of his rule and his father's rule, an enormous arsenal, a navy, an air force, chemical weapons, stockpiles. This is all stuff that he had been provided by the Russians and, as you were just saying, the Iranians who were running weapons through Syria for years. And Israel appears to have had a map of all of this and has taken hundreds of strikes to destroy all this material. Because the folks who overthrew Assad, as desirable as that is, we don't know too much about them. They're the HTS group. They're a designated terrorist group by President Trump. I don't think they have any business getting their hands on this stuff. So thanks to Israel for taking care of it.
Definitely a lot of questions about who is going to be in power, you know, and also some of the images that we're seeing, including the printing press that they believe was used to crush prisoners' bodies. I want to ask you, Victoria, though, President-elect Trump says he's going to bring lasting peace to the region. Of course, we saw during his first administration the Abraham Accords. What do you think this time around? Will he be able to deliver on that promise, and maybe what else might we expect to see?
Well, there's certainly no one I would trust more because, as you just said, he did do it during his first term. And that's really the point of a lot of what I document in The Battle for the Jewish State, which is President Trump's record on the Middle East in particular. There are other successes of the first term, but the Middle East just stands out of how he turned conventional wisdom, which according to John Kerry was we couldn't get any more peace deals between Israel and Arab neighbors until the Palestinian situation was resolved. Well, the Palestinians refused to engage. And so President Trump said, you know, we're not going to go down this rabbit hole again. And we did have partners, UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, who were willing to say, you know, we're not going to get trapped in the past anymore. We are going to go forward with Israel. And those deals have endured. And that's one of the most hopeful things about the last year, 15 months actually, since October 7th for me, is those accords have endured. And so with President Trump coming back into office, as I said, I can't think of anyone I trust more to expand those deals and bring more peace to the Middle East.
We just have a few seconds left, Victoria. I want to ask you about your new book, The Battle for the Jewish State. You show in the book how the issue of Israel isn't just a regional conflict, but part of a broader war that affects the United States. Can you explain that connection for our viewers in just a few seconds?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the enemies of the United States and Israel accuse both of us as being something called settler colonialists, that people from outside absconded with land of indigenous people, and for that reason we are all inherently imperial and racist. And that is just untrue. Israel and America are great democracies, great friends, and great powers for good on this planet. And that's what the book is all about. I just want to arm my readers with the facts so they can make that case.
All right, we're going to have to leave it right there. Victoria Coates with the Heritage Foundation, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Well, in other news, Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with members of the U.S. House Foreign Affairs Committee today in Washington.
The long-awaited meeting focused on the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. The CBN News senior White House correspondent Kelly Wright reports on how Blinken's defense of the Biden administration was received. Kelly?
Jenna and John, good evening to you. 3 years later, the withdrawal from Afghanistan, Secretary of State Antony Blinken made his final appearance before the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Now, Secretary Blinken, sitting before members of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, actually addressed what went wrong with the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. Blinken faced a barrage of tough questions about the August 30th, 2021 deadly withdrawal. Republican members of the committee described it as a disaster, highlighted by the terrorist attack at Abbey Gate, while Afghans were trying to get into Bagram Air Base to gain access to U.S. military flights, taking people out of the country.
Terrorists detonated a suicide bomb at the Hamad Karzai International Airport. It was the deadliest day since 2012. This catastrophic event was the beginning of a failed foreign policy that lit the world on fire.
13 U.S. Marines and Navy service members died during that bombing. As Secretary Blinken began to defend the Biden administration's decision to withdraw, several family members interrupted him. In response, Blinken turned to the Gold Star family members behind him to express his sympathy for their loss.
Our thoughts are with the Gold Star families of the 2,461 American service members, as well as State Department and USAID employees. I deeply regret that we did not do more and could not do more to protect them. And to those families who are here with us today, you're in my thoughts, in my prayers.
Democrats acknowledged the withdrawal was disastrous, but stated the decision to pull out and to end America's longest war was negotiated by the previous Trump administration.
The full U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan was set into irreversible motion by President Donald Trump when he concluded the Doha deal.
Secretary of State Blinken said the United States left no American behind. Republicans on the committee repeatedly challenged him on that, stating that many American citizens were in fact left in Afghanistan, and cited how the chaotic exit left women activists and others at risk from the Taliban. Mr. Blinken stated some Americans chose to remain.
All right, senior White House correspondent Kelly Wright. Thank you so much, Kelly. Coming up, a hit list and wanted posters. Could the murder of a healthcare CEO inspire copycats? A chilling warning from police next.
Welcome back. FBI Director Christopher Wray is stepping down. Today's announcement came after President-elect Trump said he would fire him in favor of a loyalist. During his 10-year term, Wray repeatedly investigated Trump, including by searching his Mar-a-Lago estate in 2022 for classified documents. Wray told employees Wednesday he would resign before Trump takes the White House. Well, the suspect charged in the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson is fighting extradition back to New York.
His defense attorney speaking out, saying he expects the 26-year-old Luigi Mangione to plead not guilty. Investigators are scouring his belongings, including a spiral notebook found during his Monday arrest at an Altoona McDonald's in Pennsylvania. According to reporting from the New York Times, it includes detailed plans for the shooting. Police also matched Mangione's fingerprints to those on a water bottle found at the scene of the crime. Authorities say Mangione considered Thompson's murder a, quote, symbolic takedown of United Healthcare over alleged corruption. New York police now alarmed by online sympathizers who view the suspect as a martyr. And wanted posters featuring other corporate executives were posted outside the New York Stock Exchange.
We'll surge resources, protective resources, around the city wherever we need to when we're anticipating and dealing with a big uptick in threats.
Law enforcement officers are on alert for the potential of copycat attacks. New York police have identified an online hit list targeting several corporate leaders.
Now to Malibu, California, where a fast-moving wildfire has scorched nearly 4,000 acres. The Franklin fire, leaving a trail of destruction, displacing thousands, including some celebrities. More than 20,000 people are under evacuation orders as the blaze destroys homes and threatens Pepperdine University.
Completely surrounded by fire. Every direction you look, surrounded by fire. I thought I was going to have to drive through a ring of fire just to get out of here.
The fire started late Monday night, the flames fueled by winds gusting up to 80 miles an hour. Officials say the blaze is 0% contained, and some 1,500 firefighters are building containment lines as air tankers drop water on the flames. Consumer prices ticked up slightly in November, showing that tackling of inflation is still a challenge.
The latest report showing inflation up 2.7% over the last year, still well above the Federal Reserve's target of 2%. Even so, economists have been expecting the Fed to cut their key short-term interest rate by 1/4 point when policymakers meet next week. Finally tonight, Christmas on display at the Vatican.
Yeah, this is the 7th edition of the traditional nativity scene. In a weekend ceremony, a giant Christmas tree covered in multicolored lights and a nativity scene were unveiled in St. Peter's Square. It's all part of more than 100 nativity scenes throughout the square, recreating the humble birthplace of Jesus. Each nativity scene is created from materials from more than 21 countries throughout Europe. Beautiful.
A beautiful scene indeed. Have you ever been?
I have not at Christmas time. Would love to go at Christmas time.
Well, thanks for watching.
Have a great night. Christmas is 2 weeks away.
It's hard to believe.